Unfiltered opinions.
Introduce me.
Sometimes you have ideas and you're not quite sure why.
As you secure the bag.
Sometimes you meet people and realize there's probably a reason why you stayed in touch.
Just listen.
Sometimes all the pieces just come together by themselves.
I'm Jimmy Moyaha.
And I'm Simon Brown.
Welcome to Insider Exchange.
And we move on to our deep dive. This week we are taking a look at multiple income streams, establishing them, what would be the best way to do it in our opinion, and how it could potentially go wrong, I suppose. Where do we start? I mean, you and I, for us, this is almost a normal thing when you when you have these things where you're self-employed or you're running a business or you're running a podcast or whatever it is, effectively one income stream, even if you're full-time employed, one income stream is not enough.
Just doesn't seem like a lot of income.
Unless you are in a parliamentary precinct. But we move on.
Start with tax. This is taxable. So if you get revenue in, you got to declare it, you pay it to SARS, and of course any costs. So if you're selling hot dogs, the cost of the heat and the dogs and the serviettes and everything is deductible, and it'll probably make you it might kick you into provisional tax. That is certainly a possibility. Depends on size, etc. You can do it as a sole prop, you can do it as a PTY, whatever the case may be. But I think the other important point is your total addressable market is probably a lot less than you think. I mean, great product. You go to various different markets. The rooftop here in Rosebank. You go to the Linden one that happens 4 times a year. There is awesome product there, but it's not always moving for whole bunches of reasons. So it's one thing that you make something that your family loves and you make it incredibly well and everything else and etc.
Yeah, to build a business out of it is something completely
different.
different.
Even a small little side hustle. So you got to still take it properly seriously. So again, let's go to hot dogs. Okay, so you're going to sell hot dogs at a market. You need to get permission from the market, obviously, to get a stand. How many people come to that market every day, like every Sunday market? How many people are there on a Sunday? Okay, 2,000 people. And you can get that information from the purveyors of the market. Okay, 2,000. How many of those 2,000 are likely to want to eat at the market? How many of them are, and there's an easy way to do this, go find the food trucks at that market and take notes and count.
That's it.
To get to that sense of, okay, how many people are actually buying food at the market? And from there, how many can I steal, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a ton in that regard in terms of treating it properly and smartly. And then, of course, there's just folks who could do something online. Maybe you could do some tax returns on the side, a hustle there, help people with their tax. Maybe you're a designer and you can make pretty pictures or something, etc. And there, your outlay is much easier, getting noticed, etc. But it comes to your point. I mean, one income just seems like never enough.
And if I think back to my first experience or first experience in side hustles and alternative income streams, so to speak. My first real exposure was around primary school when we had those entrepreneurs day or whatever, and you had to come in, pick something to sell. And that's kind of where I immediately started to look at things from a different perspective, right? So everybody comes in, you decide what goods you're selling, a grade does it for a particular day, and all the other grades come and support you. And from that age, you can already start to see that some products are more popular than others, right? So sometimes other people get sold out quicker than other people, and it makes you wonder why that person got sold out versus why someone else got sold out. And I kind of put that to the side, but when I kind of stepped into the latter part of my primary school, sort of starting into high school, it became a thing where I was just like, I need to do something. I was always interested in the entrepreneurial stuff. I guess it runs in the family. But when you start to look at different ventures and side hustles, I think that where I am now, I've grown in understanding exactly your point, Sai, is doing the research, understanding the efficiency, not just going into something from a multiple income stream perspective to say, I want to do it, right? So I was given the opportunity to go into things like affiliate marketing while I was still studying and all of that stuff. And while that's great and lovely, I remember there was one particular affiliate marketing company that wanted us to promote their products over other products in the market. And I said, what doesn't make sense to me is your product costs 4 times what the market product costs, and I'm supposed to convince my network of people that 4 times is warranted. And it was something as simple as toothpaste. Now, how do you convince people to buy a more expensive toothpaste so that I can get points in some structure? So you know what I mean? So you kind of look at things like that. And I think when you're looking at multiple income streams, it's important to distill through research what works, what is practical, how much capital outlay is going to go into it, and more than the capital outlay, what your outlay is as a person, especially if you're full-time employed. To start something while you're full-time employed means you must dedicate and carve out a certain amount of time beyond your 9 to 5 to do this thing.
Yeah.
And you must be consistent enough so that you can actually start to see the results of it. So you can't carve out an hour and then expect to see 7, 8, 10 months worth of results if you're only doing an hour a month kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the research, like you're saying, becomes so important. But when we look at the side hustles and we look at kind of just what side hustles are easy, you touched on the internet stuff. That seems to be a very good place to start. Online things like drop shipping and selling products online, having an e-commerce store, consulting and freelancing online and all of that. Obviously, it has to be something that doesn't breach your employment contract if you are full-time employed and doesn't create a conflict of interest. But I feel like the online space seems to be where a lot of people are gravitating for side hustles.
Yeah. And there's pros and cons to it. I mean, the thing with online is that it's nice and easy, right? You can get
it's convenient.
Ching in a weekend, you can have a website and everything rocking and rolling, but so can everybody else.
That's
and you've
saturation.
got saturation. So how are you getting people aware of you and your product? And that comes down to, are you going on quality? Are you going on price? Are you going on finicky? Remember fidget spinners? There's a guy I know who made millions of ZAR off fidget spinners because he just found a really, really cheap source, flooded them in, and then got caught with a ton of stock at the end of the hype. But that was fine. No, he
had made his money already.
Made his money and basically dumped it off. I think they were costing him like 80 US cents per each or something, and he could sell them into market. He was going direct to consumer at $100 or 50, whatever. His margins were obscene. If you're going online, if it's digital, that's easy. If it's physical, you've got to get delivery. Now, how does that all work, etc.? But it is, how do you get noticed? And it's more than just, you know what it comes back to? So I was at this event recently, and there was a chap who is a drop shipper, a very, very successful local guy, very successful drop shipper. And some woman was talking, she makes some herbal products or something, and she was talking around, she had spent money on influencers and hadn't got anything to show for it. And it's like, well, were they the right influencers? Why aren't you out there? And she says, I'm not good in front of a camera. And it's like, sure, but you are authentic. Maybe that's more valuable. So getting awareness, and these days of the TikToks and the Instagrams and everything, you really, really can do it. Facebook Marketplace, I mean, it is there, but how do you rise up? That's
what is your unique selling point, right?
And it can be price, it can be quality,
it can be anything. It can be authenticity, like you said. I mean, a lot of you can charge a premium price for something, but because it is authentic, because it is made and unique in its structure or in its makeup, people might be willing to pay that premium price. But you can't have a generic product that is easily replicable, that is easily marketable for someone else, and expect that your product will be the premium where you've done nothing to create that level of premium quality or premium feel to it. That's on the kind of digital side, and things like social media and, as you said, affiliate work and blogging and vlogging, those sorts of digital worlds have got some value there. But something very simple that well, I've seen it happen in places like the US where they do this Airbnb rental model where someone has a partnership with a home owner and says, we want to sign a lease agreement, but we're going to sublease onto Airbnb. We're going to manage the Airbnb and all of that.
Yeah.
That has its own set of complexities. So when you're establishing multiple income streams, understand what those complexities look like, but also understand where in the value chain you want to sit. So an example would be something like an e-hailing service, a ride-hailing service, an Uber or whatever, or even a Mr. D. There were people that bought Mr. D bikes and leased out the bikes. So then you're the landlord leasing out the asset, and you weren't the driver. Same with an Uber. You weren't the driver of the Uber. You bought the Uber, gave it to someone else. Someone else did the revenue and all of that.
The asset
so that's it, right? So when you set up your side hustles or whatever your multiple income streams look like, understand, one, your unique selling point, two, the various spaces within or the various areas in the value chain you want to play at based on your strengths. I mean, some people are much stronger at management of things, and so a portfolio of managing properties or doing that and the admin that comes with that is a strength for them. And so that might be a better side hustle than setting up a blog or a vlog or those sorts of things.
Yeah. Or becoming an expert. There's a woman I know who writes trashy fiction.
Okay.
And she makes tens of thousands of dollars a year selling it via Amazon as an e-reader.
Yeah.
To your point about Airbnb, you don't even own the apartment. You just rent the apartment and you need to get the lease that allows you, and then you Airbnb it. And so, I mean, there's almost no limit. The question is, how are you going to get it going? And some are easier, some are harder. You know, writing is hard and finding a fan base is hard. Make no mistake about that. The complete and absolute ambit from hot dogs to, I don't know, leasing airplanes by the hour.
No, finding a fan base is exceptionally hard. I mean, I think back to when you and I started this. When Insider Exchange was birthed, we didn't know where we were going to go. We didn't know what kind of fan base we were going to get. We didn't know what we were going to do with the show. But looking at it now and how great our community is and how big our community has gotten in such a short space of time, it shows you that authenticity. And for us, I mean, I'd like to think we're authentic. That's kind of why we have the unfiltered opinions on the shirt, is because we know kind of where our space is, and we know what value we want to add to our community. But I do like other side hustles that are kind of simple, right? And I think about practical things, right? So I think back to, I know someone who took their pension and built accommodation and now manages accommodation and has rental properties that people come in and rent and all of those sorts of things. They invested in it, they manage it, and they do the whole thing, right? Then there's someone who, from a side hustle perspective, went and started a business to take wedding photography or wedding photos of other people because they had a passion for photography, right? So you can do that. And your passion can drive you. I think the base passion that drives everybody that starts a side hustle is the need for money. Because bills must be paid, right? And when you look at side hustles, how do you then now look at the rates, the earnings? Because an hourly rate for a tutor versus an hourly rate for a photographer looks very different. They both do an hour's work in that hour, but different outcomes, different outputs. How do you then determine from an income stream perspective where your price point sits? And because you don't want to be overpricing into the market, you don't want to be underpricing into the market, but you also can't be pricing your price based on an industry average that is unrelated to you.
Yeah, and there it comes into also what you're doing. So tutor, are you doing math or history? Photography, are you doing pet photography or wedding photography? You can do both, but you can't charge the same for pet photography as you would for wedding.
Unless the pets are getting married.
Sure. So it is doing a huge amount of research to find out what the average is. Also the average in your area. Average for South Africa, if you're a photographer, is not important. If you're an online tutor, well then sure, it is important. So, your geographic space. And then it comes back to you. Do you want to go in cheap? be very careful of cheap as your game. You know, ShopRite makes it work, but
they've got mass.
yeah.
So if you've got critical mass, you can afford to play around with price because you have the audience.
If your differentiating point is I'm cheap, well then someone else can just undercut you, and then it's a race to zero. Construction being the perfect example.
That's it. And that's the last thing you want. The last thing you want is to start a side hustle and then have to drop your price because somebody else is cheaper than yours and you're offering the same level of value or perceived value to the client. Because at the end of the day, you and I can think we are worth X amount. But unless a third party, being the client or the consumer of your product or service, agrees with that valuation, that's what's going to determine where you kind of settle, right? There was an interesting thing from, it was a video clip I saw online from Rick Ross, and he was having a conversation with Grant Cardone, and the question that was asked to him was around the differences in performance fees. As an artist, why do you charge less? And Rick's response was, I charge less. I'm paraphrasing here, of course, people. The video's out there online. Go and watch it if you want to. But his response was, I might charge you less on a Tuesday than on a Friday, because on a Tuesday, I might not be as busy. But I'd rather charge you less than let money walk out of the door. And for me, that's a critical balance between understanding value and sort of saying, I'm willing to discount my value for a certain thing versus completely underpricing yourself or putting yourself out of the market, which is something where separate South African Vusi Tembekwayo had a separate conversation about it, where he says he charges his price, and if you want someone cheaper, he'll recommend someone cheaper, but he won't lower his price. So two different people, one willing to take a lower price, one not willing to compromise on price. Striking that balance, that's another critical thing you have to look at if you are looking to establish a brand or looking to establish yourself, whether it's a service or a product or whatever. You're new into the market and you're starting from a base where other people are there and you're trying to find your feet. How do you strike that balance between them?
I mean, it's one way. So going back many decades, when I was in Cape Town, just landed film and video background, trying to get into the film industry. And no one knows who the heck I am. So I printed little vouchers, I would work 2 days for free. Here's your voucher, claim it whenever you want. And I got a lot of free days work that I then did. But then some of the directors and stuff were like, okay, this guy, and then they phone you up for paid gigs. So it was getting my foot in the door. Now, you would be, again, careful
striking
about it.
Striking a balance.
But I needed to get in because I was completely, I was in Cape Town. I'd literally been here 4 days. I needed work. I needed to make some money. And that worked alarmingly well and got people. And then because now you got your foot in the door, boom, boom, now you're off to the races, everything's lacquer. But what it was is, here's 2 days I'll work for you. Like, call it in whenever you want, but it's only going to be 2 days.
I found a very similar tactic does work as well from my perspective around, both you and I do speaking gigs as well, right? And public speaking is always a weird thing because there's no market, there's no price.
Yeah.
There's no, here's the price list, this is the service, whatever, right? You kind of benchmark on a variety of factors that no one really knows, and it's based on the client and the client's needs and the client's budget and all of those sorts of things. And you don't want to have a public speaking gig where you're outpricing the client, because then the client might take you on the first time and never use you again. You don't want to underprice yourself so that when you suddenly increase your price, the client drops you because you've become expensive overnight. That's where I found it very interesting to manage that as well around pricing. So unique selling point, got, tick, fine. Market, fine, tick. Research is done around what the market looks like. Kind of value add and differentiators and all of those things, you look at those things. And price is a component that you have to consider.
And that's a great point, because I don't know what the price is in that case of doing speaking gigs. I mean, also, is it, are you in a panel? Are you emceeing a whole day, half day? Is it a keynote, etc., etc.? But I've never fully worked out that. And there are some people who go what I think to be alarmingly too cheap. I mean, I've had this idea we should unionize, because there's some folks who I think just are chronically underselling in terms of price, and I won't go that point. And I know that I lose work sometimes when you get an email.
But that's the risk you run, right?
That's the risk you
run. But at the same time, I think when you are especially if you're in the service industry, like the speaking and all of the blogging, the vlogging, those sorts of things are service related things. Finding value and attributing value to whatever service you are offering is the critical part, because once I can establish what value looks like, I can establish what price looks like from the value. So I'm going to give you X amount of value, and that is why I'm charging you X or Y price or whatever, right? With a product, it's kind of easier to say, here's the product, here's a similar product in the market, here's a benchmark, here's how other products in that same range kind of sell for. Services are particularly hard to price. And I think back to, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, things like garden services were a big thing. And to find someone to come in and do the garden work at a certain price or whatever, you start to look at different factors. The result of the service and the satisfaction of the service often gives the consumer the comfort to say, okay, I can understand why I paid for that, which comes back to your point around the speaking stuff. If someone is satisfied and says, you know what, Simon was a fantastic speaker, I can see why we paid him that amount of money. Then you kind of get past the whole phase of, am I too expensive? Am I too cheap? And all of that. But establishing value is critical to determining what you're going to charge for that value.
Yeah, 100%. And it's a hard game to determine that point. And I would always say to folks, err on the side of more, because you can drop. It's easier to offer a 20% discount than it is to try and jack rates up 20%. But you mentioned garden services and pool cleaning. And I remember going way back now into the 80s. I did it for a while, where I would clean pools in the neighborhood. We never had one, but I'd go and clean it. And it was a nice bit of weekend money for me. But then it's sort of, anyone can be it. What's your barrier to entry? And the barrier to entry is nothing. Just like anyone with a bit of whatever HTH and a raker can do it. And the same happened with garden services. There used to be some kids who would take their dad's lawnmower and go mow lawns, and I'm sure. And now it's just like it's become almost an industries of them. But that barrier to entry. And I know from my sister, who gets her pool done, and she flips through pool cleaners from time to time, and they're all struggling to make money. There's just far too many of them in the greater Durban area, and it's tough to make a good living. Now we're talking here about a side hustle, but it's that commoditization of the service. Now that's not to say that things that are commoditized aren't bad, but understand that they're commoditized. Understand what you're getting into, and again, what is your unique selling point? And I can't think of anything in the servicing or the pool and garden, but quite possibly there is something there. Maybe you aerate the roses. Maybe there's almost anything. I mean, there's a chap I know who, we and him, and then I left it and he carried on and still does it 30 years later. He provides flowers to corporate offices. So
Okay.
a bunch of flowers on your reception desk, bunch of flowers here, there, everything.
Comes in and
He
maintains
comes
the
in once a
flowers,
week,
changes the
switches out
flowers,
the
changes the
vases.
water, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
That's a service. That's a service that the company doesn't want to have to take care of. So when you think about your next side hustle, folks, think about these things. Think about the uniqueness of your value add or your product. Think about the value that you attach to it. Think about whether or not there are barriers to entry in the market. Think about how much you want to price it. There's so much to consider when setting up multiple income streams. But what I would like, and what we'd definitely like from our side, is for you as a community to let us know what your side hustles are. Let us know what side hustles have worked for you. Let us know what side hustles have failed for you. We've tried some things. I've tried some things that haven't worked out at all. Story for another day. But we definitely want to know, because like the things that are out there, we can always learn from each other. We can always share information, and maybe I might not have thought of something, and suddenly reading the comments and finding out that this is a side hustle that someone else has tried that has worked for them could inspire me to start a new side hustle. I've often found that some really good ideas come from reading other people's experiences and getting a sense of what other people have experienced. So please give us some comments, some insights around your side hustles and how you are making multiple income streams work for you. But until next time, that's the deep dive. And we wrap things up this week with a look at investor insights. We're taking a look at the CIPC's update on the ultimate beneficial ownership registry. They are planning to deregister 500,000 or more companies that are non-compliant with the regulations. Remember, to be compliant with CIPC regulations, we now have to include the ultimate beneficial ownership registry that needs to be submitted for every company that is registered. We're also going to take a look at our stock picks, see what our wall looks like, and what we would like to update from that perspective. Annual returns on the CIPC. You cannot file an annual return and completely be compliant with the CIPC now unless you've updated this ultimate beneficial ownership structure, registry, or whatever it is.
This is part of our grey listing.
Yes.
Trying to get off the grey.
Yes, trying to get off the grey listing. So greater accountability, greater transparency around companies and the ownerships of those companies. And so ultimate beneficial ownership is, even if there is a shell company owned by another shell company, owned by another shell company, you must drill down into who ultimately benefits as the shareholder. It doesn't have to be a direct shareholder, but who the ultimate beneficial owner of that particular business is. Now, it's interesting that it's determined in different ways, right? So it's not just about whether or not I have shares in the company. I can derive a benefit from a company, or I can maintain significant control and influence over that company. And that could be seen in the eyes of the law as being the ultimate beneficial owner. So if Jimmy and Simon set up a company and Simon is the director of the company, but Jimmy enjoys all of the profits at the end of the year, then just because Simon is a director doesn't mean he's the ultimate beneficial owner of the benefit derived from that company.
Yeah, no, fair point. And it is, particularly when you start sort of the shell companies and stuff like that. But it is, and I think particularly in trusts, because this is applicable across the trust space as well, which is to who ultimately benefits from it. Because this is, and at the end of the day, it's money laundering, right? It's all of that the folks are concerned about. And I remember this because I had an interview. I actually thought it went into effect a year ago, but I think it got delayed or kicked down something like that. And there was, but for most, no problem. It gets, for my little PTY, piece of cake. For some, it gets complicated. I mean, let's for a moment think about, Standard Bank, who's owned a big slice by PRC. Well, I mean,
who then also owns Liberty.
Well,
has a subsidiary, right? So if you're doing an entire group structure, Liberty's within that.
And if Coronation owns 5% of Standard Bank, do they have to then, how far do they go down that line? Or can they, and maybe that's different because these are certainly economic interest and voting interest. And that's nice and easy. One share, one vote, so you get that sense. But of course, there will be companies holding shares or holding funds that Coronation has that are Standard Bank, and that's probably not how you do money laundering. I'm not a pro at the money laundering part, but it does get some fun in games.
Yeah, I think especially for larger companies, and you look at those kinds of setups, it does get complicated. And I know for guys like the PIC, where you have somewhat of it might not be a controlling stake, but it is a meaningful stake. It might not be significant to be north of 25%, but you own 15, 16% of a company. Big. It's a big stake, right? Yeah. Especially if that company is a Sanlam or a Standard Bank. And then to look into all of that. But I think from an ultimate beneficial ownership perspective, it's more applicable to the private companies. Yeah. The less around the listed space, because the listed guys have got those requirements in place already, right? It's already onerous on them. But from a private perspective, you and I, as citizens that have a company, now have to declare, are there other shareholders or other interested parties that derive a benefit from the company?
Yeah. And then, of course, there's different classes of shares.
Yes.
A's and B's shares, like we had with we still got with Naspers, Facebook, Google, etc.
We got rid of with Fortress, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Fortress got rid of them. Pick and Pay had a control structure for a while. Remgro's got B-class shares.
Yes,
which essentially control the company without having. So you haven't got economic control, but you've got voting control as well. Now, again, we've gone back into the realm of listed, but you can see those structures happening in the unlisted as well, where there's some high voting shares, like the Naspers N's and A's. So the N's get the dividends. The A's don't get dividends, but they get 1,000 votes per N, so they effectively control Naspers. but
So-
not economic interest.
There we go. So when you're looking at the beneficial ownership registry, be sure to consult a tax consultant. That's why they are there. They can help you. There's company secretaries that can help you out there to make sure that you are compliant. This is the week, I believe, that the CIPC has said that they would start to look to deregister companies that are non-compliant. So do a quick squiz of your CIPC profile, check whether everything is up to date and everything is in order. You should be able to kind of navigate it quite easily. And again, speak to someone if you need help. Remember, this is not financial advice, but you can get financial advice from a financial advisor. That's why they exist, right? That's kind of why they are there. We're going to look into our picks. We're going to see if we update things on our wall. We're going to start by adding things to the wall before removing things or moving other things around. Let's start locally.
Sure.
We are looking at Tsoho-san Gaming and Boxer. Because Boxer listed last week, so now we can look at them, right? Let's start with Tsoho-san Gaming. We had Sun International. We've got Sun International under alternative on here. And I suspect it was for reasons either around Tsoho or around someone like City Lodge that we might have liked better at the time. Where do we put Tsoho-san Gaming? They gave us numbers, I think it was... Or they're giving us numbers this week.
No, they gave us
Last
numbers
week.
last week.
It was last week. Yeah, it was last week.
Yeah. I forget which day last week.
Yeah. Towards the end of the week.
27th, which was midweek.
Midweek.
Yeah. I gotta say, the numbers didn't particularly inspire me. The stock did collapse a bit, and I think there is better out there.
Okay.
Most notably, I would say Southern Sun or Southern Sun is long been my preferred in the space. They've got good operations. City Lodge I like, but they're just not getting it really working. And then Sun International, and then Southern Sun. What's the Southern Sun share code? Sun International is SUI.
SUI, yes.
Is
Southern Sun.
I like the sector. I absolutely do. Southern Sun has been doing excellently well. Tsoho, I thought those numbers were a little bit bleak. I don't think, they've got some good assets, obviously a lot of gaming assets, and a 12% stake in City Lodge, which is weird. We chatted about that many ages ago when that crept
That was such
up.
a weird discovery to find.
Yeah, I know. And yeah, I suppose they were expecting better things to happen with City Lodge, but so far not at all. Tsoho, I couldn't get particularly excited about it at all. Notwithstanding, it's a good sector.
It is. It's a very good sector. And their flagship brand is obviously the Monte Casino precinct.
For want of a phrase.
Yeah. And if you look at just the other areas, you look at Sun International. Sun International is buying out Piedmont. Obviously, they're buying out Emperors now.
That got next.
Yeah, so that was that 7.3 billion rand takeover that went to the Competition Commission. That was an interest there. But to have someone like Tsoho, who, when I looked at the share price, kind of been straggling around between 12 and 14 rand, not really doing much, coming up to 14, down to 10, sitting at 12 kind of thing. I'm not particularly excited by it at the moment. I think we should put it in alternatives because I think, as you said, there are better alternatives out there. That was fairly easy to kind of sift through. It's a good industry, but it's a tough industry, right? You're gonna you're gonna have your wits about you there. Boxer.
Sure.
Listed 63 rand, went to 63.50 last week. Now today 68 rand.
68 rand and 70 cents, high 68.99. So I hold Boxer. I have them in the market for sale at a price about another 10% higher, and I'm going to get hit.
Okay.
I put it on good for a month, and I think I'm going to get taken out in a month. This thing's going higher.
Yeah.
It's no longer cheap, right?
It's not cheap.
At 54 rand, which was listing price, that was a decent price. Absolutely it was. I thought that was a fair price. 60, I thought it starts getting a little bit much. 68, it's a lot. Yes, there's a great story. Yes, they freed from the pick and pay scenario, etc. They've got lots of rollout they can potentially do. We're a country where our sort of low LSM grosses are not very big compared to others like what you see in Spain and South America and the like. I know
Poland, those sorts of places.
Chantal Marx did some digging on that. But at the end of the day, it's starting to get into expensive land, I think. I really do. At 69 rand, you're putting in a lot of goodness going forward. And I'm not saying it's not a lot of goodness, but let's be clear, it's going up against the juggernaut globally, which is ShopRite.
That's true. And if you're already going to, I mean, at 100 Rand, you'd be at 30% of the ShopRite share price at that point already, because they're just around the 300 Rand range. Could this be another tale of a Capitec, where the share price runs to obviously not 3,000 Rand a share, but I mean, Capitec versus its banking peers?
Yeah, you see, I think not, because I think here you've got a very low margin business, so significantly competitive. And Capitec really did innovate. And now with 21.5 million clients, can cross-sell. And,
That's it.
you know, they give you a day pass for Showmax. They'll give you a day pass for DSTV if you are
They
a Capitec
continue
client.
to innovate.
Yeah. Boxer, with respect, you can do funky stuff.
Yes.
But you're not innovating in sort of the
That's
sense
true.
that we're. This to me is more a We Buy Cars.
Okay.
Although I think We Buy Cars is again taking an industry which is, you know, not a fun one, which is secondhand cars, buying or selling, and kind of trying to make it sweet and nice and pretty and all. Boxer's ultimately just a grocer.
Where are we going to put it? The other grocer we have, Spar, is neutral, and Pick and Pay we had at Like It because there was that upside potential from Boxer.
So
ShopRite is obviously blue chip, has been blue chip.
So doesn't Pick and Pay, which is now $30, mind you, Pick and Pay's maybe got some upside, shift to neutral. So where would Boxer go? I mean, at this point, it's expensive. I wouldn't be buying it here.
It's twice the share price of Pick and Pay.
Yeah, well, it's more than
Almost
market
3
cap.
times,
I mean,
yeah.
basically, there was a point last week where I think you got it Pick and Pay for almost free.
Yes.
And it's got a bigger market cap than Pick and Pay, which is why I say at some point there's going to be pressure to unbundle them. It's got potential. It's going to do great numbers. The share price is not going to collapse back to 54 as many have thought. This is not a Dis-Chem style listing, which was disappointing in the sense that it popped on the listing and came back, but that was expensive. This has just been priced at, the listing price was fair.
So we like it. We've got easy money. We're not neutral about it.
No, we like it.
We like it.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. We don't yet know if it's going to be easy money. We don't have numbers. We don't have performance.
Well,
we don't
yeah,
have
yeah.
results. We'll get a first set of annual financials. We'll review that. But for now, we like the stock and we're going to add it to the wall. International picks. We are taking a look at Palantir as well as ByteDance's parent company, well, ByteDance, that's TikTok's parent company. Let's start with Palantir in the US. That was a Trump play. That's a Trump trade. Very simple, straightforward defense company. We know how Trump is on pro-America, and we know how America is on wars around the world and propping up their defense budgets and the defense expenditure. Do we like it enough for it to make our wall? That's the question.
Price earnings 335. Forward price earnings 150. Hey, it's making cash, free cash flow per share. I did not expect to see that. Let's be clear, 18 cents on a 67 Rand stock, but I didn't actually expect to see that it would have a free cash flow per share. This is not a stock I know much about, but there are a lot of folks who I think are very smart who really, really like it. But this thing, to your point, since bottoming in 2023 at around about 12 is up more than 5-fold in a couple of years. Has the market, and is now, you know, I mean, the average analyst says it's worth $40 and is trading at 67. Has it got ahead of itself? And I think the answer is yes. Nice business, but I'm not sure that there's much value at these current levels. Sure.
Okay. That's interesting. How much of that value can be attributed to Trump now becoming president? Will that increase the value? Obviously, with his pro-America stance, that bodes well for an American company like
I
that.
would say a bunch. I mean, pre the election, the week before the election, it was trading at around $41, and now it's at around 67. It's up 50%
that's
just
it.
on Trump.
Just on Trump alone.
And we've seen the same with Tesla. And I'm like, I mean, Trump doesn't like electric vehicles and doesn't believe in climate change as a problem.
No.
So, like, why is Tesla? I think it's overstretched. I think this is going to Trump and all of his bromances, and we saw it in the first term. There will be a
falling out of sorts.
and then Palantir will get a little bit cheaper when it happens. Perhaps.
Okay, so for now, we might want to avoid it. We might. I don't know if we want to even look for an alternative because this one is very much. The underlying factors that would drive it are very centered around certain things in a certain economy, in a certain country, in a certain region, in a certain president. So it's very difficult to kind of find an alternative for that. But for now, we might just want to avoid it a little bit. The other one that we want to take a look at is ByteDance.
Yeah. So how do you get access to ByteDance?
You would have
Buy
to go
shares,
through
platforms like Hive. Okay, there are some that you can buy.
Yeah, there's some platforms you can go through. It's not very easy to get hold of, which also then affects how we view it. Because, I mean, I like the convenience of being able to get in and out of something.
Liquidity on the JSE.
That's it.
So ByteDance, TikTok, love it. That algo is insane.
Yes. There is
sauce in there.
Yeah.
America wants to ban it, and they've appealed. So, in fact, it was a bipartisan.
I'm not sure. Did Trump say he wants to ban it or bring it back?
No. Congress and this gets fun, right?
Yeah.
Remember, so Trump hated it, but one of his big donors is a shareholder in it. So now he loves it again. So he wanted to ban it. Now he doesn't want to ban it. But Congress and Senate passed a bill. House and Senate passed a bill which Biden has signed, which says they need to either sell off or leave America. But ByteDance is appealing on, is it First Amendment, freedom of speech grounds?
But in that case, the appeal needs to only hold for the next 35 days. Because the moment Trump comes in and the Republicans have taken the House, the Senate, and the presidency, they can repeal whatever Biden would have passed. And it wouldn't have passed at that point either because...
it's been passed.
It's
gone
been
the whole
passed.
way.
Okay, so it's been passed.
They can repeal it. I don't know how easy they can repeal it. I don't know that Trump can just
I don't know if he cares enough.
But he can direct his Justice Department with to whichever weird AG he's going to appoint to go easy or whatever the case may be on them. That said, if ByteDance gets banned in America, it just means that 100 million American teenagers are going to buy VPNs. so I mean, the trade has actually...
So the trade is the VPN companies. Okay, we've got it.
I got no idea on valuations. It is an amazing little business. It's the unlisted nature which always just makes it so much more different. Now, this is not your traditional unlisted. Fair enough about that. It's not some little stock no one's ever heard of. This one really does happen and does, but it is going to be difficult to get on. Apparently, shares are trading about $150.
Down a bit for the year. Well, up a bit for the year, but down over the last kind of 12 months if you're looking at it. Not much. Yeah, I think for me, the access to the stock becomes a bit of a challenge as well. But what they are doing, I mean, they've been rolling out a lot of good stuff within that TikTok platform. It has taken over from a social media perspective. It's difficult to launch a social media platform that people are going to gravitate towards.
On any sort of number.
That's it. Mark Zuckerberg did it. We launched Facebook. We kind of had an experience of what that was like. We had an experience of what things like MySpace looked like. When Twitter was launched, it was a different version of those things. To launch something like, and to avoid it being something like Snapchat, where the craze wears off, you need some form of sustainability. And for now, they've been able to monetize various areas of TikTok and all of that. So I think they're doing well from a business perspective. And if they lose that US market, I don't know if it's something that's going to materially affect the business. I think access to the share for me comes back to that. It's a difficult share to get hold of, but I do like it. I think it's got a place on our wall.
I like it. Where does it go?
Where does it go? That's the other thing. So it's definitely not going to be easy money. We do like it. We're not neutral on it. There aren't too many alternatives at this point. And if there are alternatives, the likes of Meta, for me, are mainstream, and I wouldn't. You know what I mean? I think if you go, the other play that you have with someone like a ByteDance is you're removing yourself from the concentration of US stocks. You've got so many stocks that are US based, all companies, even Asian companies go and have ADR listings in the US, but you want to have something that has a WhatsApp, a WeChat, like an alternative. I've always been an alternatives guy, right? So I think we like it. We like it. Yeah. All right. That's where we're going to put it on the wall. Folks, if you have missed out on our conversations, they are available. we do encourage you to go catch up on the live stream. That's why Market Matters is no longer part of the packaged segment, is that Market Matters is now listed under our stream section on our YouTube channel. But we do still put up one audio file for all of the segments together, so we combine it so that you don't have to go and figure it out. And we do that for your listening pleasure, the same way we have the show for your viewing pleasure. Please engage with us. Please let us know your thoughts. We've been loving your thoughts around the cost of education and what your experiences have been. Thank you so much for that. Let us know what your favorite pizzas are as well. We will put out a poll. We still have the Rand poll running for the next week. We'll give the results of that Rand poll next week in our final episode. Remember, next week we're taking a break because we also get tired. It's also been a long year.
December.
It's December. It's not December. We don't spell it with a C. It's December. So we're going to do our final December episode next week. Please tune in for that. But until next time, investing isn't hard. Just try it.